Some additional advice to the bearer of the Qur'an. Number one, the bearer of the Qur'an must have ikhlas. Ikhlas is pure, 100% sincerity. Having a sincere intention when studying the Qur'an is key. This is inextricably linked to the condition of the qalb. So sins affect the heart, and then the heart affects the level of ikhlas. So ensure that you are very careful to avoid sins, and when you do fall into sins, you make istighfar, tawbah, and seek the means for the sin to be effaced and removed from your account. And then you ask Allah Ta'ala for forgiveness, because ikhlas is the key in understanding the Qur'an. The bearer of the Qur'an must have ikhlas before and if he wants or she wants to understand the Qur'an. Number two, approach the Qur'an with a readiness to follow the guidance. This is important. There are many people saying different things about the amazing aspects and dimensions to the Qur'an, and this is good. But it is critically important that the bearer of the Qur'an approach the Qur'an from the angle that they are seeking to follow the guidance. Do not fall into the trap of just trying to make this an academic study. This is not an academic study. You will get amazing and intellectual knowledge and understanding, but that's not the primary purpose. This can be further expanded by the comment by Sayyid Qutb rahimullah, who writes, we should return to it, the Qur'an, to find out what kind of person it asks us to be, and then be like that. During this process, we will also discover the artistic beauty in the Qur'an, the marvelous tales in the Qur'an, the scenes of the Day of Judgment in the Qur'an, the logic of the Qur'an, and all other such benefits which are sought in the Qur'an by academic and literary people. We will enjoy all these other aspects, but these are not the main object of our study. Our primary purpose is to know what way of life is demanded of us by the Qur'an, the view of the universe which the Qur'an wants us to have, what is the nature of our knowledge of Allah taught to us by the Qur'an, and what kind of legal and constitutional system it asks us to establish in the world. Number three, ask the help of Allah Ta'ala through dua in understanding the Qur'an. When faced with problems in understanding the Qur'an, one should make dua and ask for help and guidance at the same time of trying to understand the Qur'an. It is mentioned that when Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu would recite the word of Allah Ta'ala about Rabbi Zidni ilma, this ayah from Surah Taha, he would say, Allahumma Zidni ilman wa imanan wa yaqina. Oh Allah, increase me in knowledge, faith and conviction. It is also reported that when Ibn Taymiyyah encountered difficulty in understanding an ayah of the Qur'an, he would find a masjid, do sujood, and say, O teacher of Ibrahim, grant me understanding. Number four, read the Qur'an having yaqeen that every word is the kalam of Allah Ta'ala. We spoke earlier about doubt. Yaqeen is key. You must endeavor to reach the level of yaqeen, understanding the magnification of the divine speech. Imam al-Ghazali quoted someone as saying, I read the Qur'an but did not find sweetness in it. Then I read it as if I was hearing it from the Prophet while he was reciting it to his companions. Then I moved a stage further and read the Qur'an as if I was hearing it from Jibreel while he delivered it to the Prophet. Then Allah Ta'ala brought me to a further stage. I began to read it as if I was hearing it from the speaker. Number five, read the Qur'an as if every word is directed directly to you. Recite the Qur'an as if you are the one being addressed. When Allah Ta'ala speaks about Jannah, think you are the one He is speaking about. When Allah Ta'ala speaks about the disbelievers and warns them, think that you are the one that is being warned from His punishment. When the descriptions of those being dragged to the fire, imagine it is you that it is happening to. May Allah Ta'ala protect us from that. Another dimension to this is that what the Qur'an does is that it brings you back to your default. reading books, articles, posts online, listening to lectures affects the cognitive map of how we think, what we think, with what proportionality we think. Sometimes we can go and start thinking about things too much, or too less, or less priority, or more priority. And what the Qur'an does is that it gives you and sets you back to what should be right and your default position. So it reminds you about today. It reminds you about yourself. It will remind you about your family. It will remind you about Allah Ta'ala. It will remind you about your akhirah. It will remind you about Jannah. It will remind you about hellfire. It will remind you about your responsibilities. It will remind you about enjoining good and forbidding the bad in proportionality, giving you, resetting the cognitive map to that which is optimum for you as a mu'min. And that is one of the benefits that the bearer of the Qur'an will have in his continual recital of the Qur'an. What the bearer of the Qur'an should and must do is not recite the Qur'an only by reciting some surah of the Qur'an at one point of the day or the week. For example, Surah Al-Mulk before you sleep, or Surah Al-Kahf on a Friday, and think this is my portion of the Qur'an that I'm reciting, and this is sufficient for me. The bearer of the Qur'an should be continuously reciting the Qur'an cover to cover. It may not be that you are able to cover more than 2 pages a day. It does not matter. You do what you can, but you do it from cover to cover and start again. Cover to cover, start again. And this continuous cycle will reset you to how you should prioritize and focus on those aspects which are most important. Number 6, recite the Qur'an slowly while your aql is able to digest and process what is being recited. Detach from all outward and inward whisperings and distractions, albeit the waswas from shaitan, the waswas from your own nafs, the waswas from others, the waswas from your phone, from the waswas from the online, waswas from things that you may want to watch, things that you may want to listen to. When you're reciting the Qur'an, try to mute those distractions, whether they are from inward or outward places. Number 7, ask key questions. How do I practically carry out the injunctions and guidance upon myself, those under my authority, and communally? This is very important in how we implement the Qur'an. If you do not ask key questions, you cannot get the answer. And when you are trying to implement it, that is when those questions will come. Number 8, there's an acronym that can help you and help us as bearers of the Qur'an, and that is BROAD, which BRUAD, broad, to believe in the Qur'an, to read the Qur'an, to understand it, to act upon it, to give da'wah. Number 9, be a zahid. Zahid is the one. Zuhud is to take from this dunya and worldly possessions only that which will benefit you for your akhirah. Do not be a person as a bearer of the Qur'an who loves money, loves riches, loves the luxuries of this temporary world. Be a person who loves the riches and luxuries of the permanent afterlife. If you love this dunya over the akhirah, you will have problems in understanding and implementing the Qur'an. May Allah Ta'ala bless us to be amongst the people of the akhirah, the people of zuhud, and the people who prefer the akhirah to this dunya. May Allah Ta'ala bless us with Jannah. Number 10, be a person of integrity. You are a person who is bearing the Qur'an. You are a person who has inherited prophethood, even though no revelation has been revealed directly upon you. Never compromise your position as a bearer and a carrier and a companion of the Qur'an by flirting with people who will bring into question your integrity, albeit the rich, the people of power, governments, or any such type of parties that can bring your honor or character or personality into question. One of the scholars of the past, he wrote in his book actually, Akhlaq, Hamil al-Qur'an, Sheikh al-Ajuri, from the first 4 generations or so, that he, i.e. the bearer of the Qur'an, does not beautify his voice for the sake of the kings of this world. They don't become famous and then that power or fame gets to their mind, and now they do not enjoy the good and forbid the evil, and they seek monetary means and power, and the people of power have, do, and will always use people of religion in their little games of maintaining their power structures over people. Never be one of them that you are ever used by the people of power who can misuse you and use you against the teachings of the Qur'an. And this unfortunately is where people have fallen into, and this is where the bearer of the Qur'an must fear the trap that may be out to get you. If you do not expect a trap, then you can easily fall into it. But if you can expect a trap, then you are ready to ensure you do not fall into it. This path of knowledge is a path that is full of thieves. It is full of people who are there to try to snatch you or snatch from you what you have. And you are more likely to be defrauded by people in this path than somebody trying to defraud you by your money or trying to steal from you. May Allah protect us. Number 11, that the bearer of the Qur'an should never ever do, and that is abandon the Qur'an. And there are a number of ways that a person can end up abandoning the Qur'an. Number 1, abandoning the Qur'an, taking its words, commands lightly or as a joke or in a mocking way. Number 2, abandoning the listening of the Qur'an. Number 3, abandoning learning and teaching others of the Qur'an. Number 4, abandoning the recitation of the Qur'an. Number 5, abandoning the memorization of the Qur'an. Number 6, abandoning the tadabbur of the Qur'an. Number 7, abandoning acting on what you have learned from the Qur'an. Number 8, abandoning ruling, judging, legislating according to the Qur'an. These are some of the ways where people can fall into with respect to abandoning the Qur'an, doing hijrah from the Qur'an. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. So if you are a person who used to listen and now listen to music, come back and listen to the Qur'an. If you are a person that used to learn and now you stop learning the Qur'an, go back to learning the Qur'an. If you are a person that used to teach and no longer teach the Qur'an, teach the Qur'an. If you are a person that used to recite the Qur'an much but now do not, go back to reciting the Qur'an. If you are a person that used to memorize the Qur'an and now do not, go back and rejuvenate that desire and love to memorize the Qur'an. If you are a person that used to reflect much on the Qur'an and no longer do, then go back and reflect and restart that tadabbur of the Qur'an. If you are a person that stopped practicing what you have learned from the Qur'an, return and start to learn the Qur'an. And if you are a person or a people or a party or a group or a government that has abandoned the ruling or legislation according to the Qur'an or by the Qur'an, then return back to the Qur'an and rule according to what the Qur'an has revealed. And finally, I would like to end this whole lecture repeating the advice that the Prophet ﷺ told Hudayfa. Hudayfa radiallahu anhu was asking about fitna, speaking about fitna. The Prophet ﷺ was repeating one advice. تَعَلَّمَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَاتَّبِعْ مَا فِيهِ. Learn the book of Allah and follow that which is in it. So that is where the traps can be for the bearer of the Qur'an, where they either are deficient in the way they learn the book of Allah, in abandoning learning the book of Allah, or not learning it through beneficial knowledge and not knowledge which does not benefit. Or there's a deficiency in the way that you follow it, and following it, not following your desire, following anybody else's desires, not following what you want, but following what Allah Ta'ala has said. And through this comes the guidance of Allah Ta'ala, through this comes the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala, through this comes the love of Allah Azza wa Jal. And in this journey for the bearer of the Qur'an, glad tidings to the bearer of the Qur'an, this journey ends with seeing Allah Ta'ala Himself in Jannah.